What is up, my bearded bros? Bearded Maniac here. This is a video I have been waiting to make for months. We are doing the NBA predictions. Now, this time through, we are relatively going over every playoff series. We're going to go all the way through and make our initial predictions. But as series end and the second round begins, I will put up a little snippet clips of who exactly I think will win the actual round 2 matchups. Now, initially, I am most likely going to get at least 4 of these predictions wrong, but I don't care. Last year, I did relatively well, even though my games were pretty spot on, but there were some areas where I absolutely flopped. Mainly being the Eastern Conference Finals, even though I did predict Golden State going all the way. Although I feel like I picked the Celtics more often than I should have last year. I was just hopelessly optimistic. Not so much this year, though. We start off with the 1 and 8 seed of the West, the Golden State Warriors versus the LA Clippers. Danilo Gallinari, the unsung small forward of the Clippers, having a very, very solid season, probably one of the best seasons of his young career, going up against KD, one of the best clutch shooters, maybe not necessarily clutch, one of the best shooters, one of the biggest or best or tallest players in the league, which makes his shooting even more dangerous. He can defend, maybe not necessarily like the best, but he can still defend. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Clippers can even steal one game in this series. One reason maybe being the Clippers steal a game would be in LA, Warriors, taking it a little bit too for granted kind of thing. That being said, I think Golden State shall sweep this series. Honestly, I don't see how the Clippers can compete with the shooting of Steph Curry and Kevin Durant. One thing that is a concern for me going into this postseason is the health concerns that often arise with Steph Curry later in seasons, or at least of seasons past. If he gets hurt, if his ankle starts bothering him again, who knows what's going to happen with his eyes. Maybe someone pokes him out and something gets messed up. I don't want that at all. I think he's a tremendous player to watch. He's fun. He's creative. The shots he makes are just amazing. That being said, I think Golden State sweeps, but injuries are a huge concern for this team. Hopefully they get this series done as quickly as possible. That way they can get it into the second round healthy, being because they face the winner of Utah and Houston. I really like this matchup mainly because you have the defensive stalwart of Rudy Gobert against Clint Capella, one of the better inside finishers in the league. He's very underrated. He's a very solid rebounder, perfect complementary piece to James Harden, especially when James Harden gets a bad habit of planking about 13-15 threes in a game, which could happen very well against Utah. The interesting question for me is, will Utah put Ricky Rubio or one of their better defensive guards on James Harden and leave Mitchell on maybe an Eric Gordon or possibly a Chris Paul, knowing that he's probably going to be a slight liability in those matchups? I'm looking for possibly Fareed to come off the bench in this series for Houston. I like Donovan Mitchell in this series. I think it's going to be very punch and go. I think it's going to be a 6-game series, eventually with Houston winning on the back of 3-point shooting. And also, I think Chris Paul, if there was an MVP of the series, it would be Chris Paul, hands down. Hopefully, again, just like the Warriors, they stay healthy because that matchup would be fun. Then we have Portland and OKC in the third matchup of the Western Conference, where Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, one of the better backcourt duos in the league, not as good as Klay Thompson and Steph Curry, but still really, really, really solid. And Fernie Simons, he provides a solid boost off the bench. He could be a very underrated player in this series, but I think this comes down to, and I say but a lot, Nurkic being out. Nurkic's injury, I think, makes the difference in this matchup. If he was completely healthy, I would probably take Portland in 7 games here. But with OKC, with the shooting of Paul George, with the ball movement and rebounding ability of Russell Westbrook, yes, I know he can't shoot, and yes, I know people say he stat pads, but against a smaller lineup like Portland, if Russell can take those rebounds and give Oklahoma City another possession with a player like Schroeder possibly with him in the backcourt, with a Steven Adams in the paint who can alley-oop bet with the best of them, who can dominate inside against a player like Enes Kanter, that does not scare me. You also have a relatively solid bench for OKC. Going up against a decent bench of Portland. Portland's one of those teams where their bench isn't necessarily the greatest. Their starting lineup, like 3 through 5 right now, isn't necessarily the greatest. But Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum can both take over a game if they have to. I think this goes to 6. I think OKC takes this one, being in Game 6 in OKC, while also stealing 2 games in Portland and losing 1 in OKC. That's how I'm going to say it, because that's how bold I am. You got Denver at San Antonio to round out the West. This one's very interesting indeed, because San Antonio has struggled wholeheartedly on the road, but they match up, to me, relatively well with Denver. Forbes, White, DeRozan, Gay, LaMarcus Aldridge, all those guys are very solid players and can defend the ball. The only question for me, being with San Antonio, is can you bring that consistency in the road to Denver, especially in games 1 and 2, where realistically you're going to have to steal at least 1 game in the first 2 to have a chance at this series, because Jokic with a 2-game lead is not going to throw this, or at least that's what I think personally. That being said, I just don't know if San Antonio has the punch, the firepower to compete with Denver. And I don't know if outside of Jokic, if Denver has the firepower to do this. I think this is actually a very tough series. One that I think Denver should have tried to avoid, mainly because although it does look like one of the easiest paths to the Warriors, most likely in the Eastern Conference Finals, I think Denver matches up better with a team like a Utah or like an OKC. I almost feel like the Spurs with Popovich are the antithesis of the Nuggets. As much as I love the Nuggets, and as much as I would favor them in probably 4 different possible matchups, probably 5, I would honestly favor the Nuggets against OKC, Portland, Utah, and LA. But San Antonio with Popovich, I do not see them losing in the first round. Although DeRozan does lose in the playoffs, DeRozan does disappear in the playoffs. It's going to be tough. I think the Spurs steal it in 7. I think, honestly, they struggle to win in Denver. They lose the first 3 in Denver. They win the first 3 in San Antonio, pushing it to a 7th. And that's when the brilliance of Greg Popovich comes out. Now, one thing you have to look at in this series is the incredible home record of San Antonio and the slightly porous road record of Denver as well. I think with better coaching, San Antonio takes one, or is more likely to take one on the road, and clutch this series in Game 7. That brings us to the East. We have Milwaukee at Detroit. Giannis versus Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond. The biggest question here is going to be, will the front court of Detroit pop up? If the if the guards really show up, is what I meant to say. If the guards really show up, then they have a chance of upsetting the Bucks. I'm not saying a great chance. I'm saying maybe around 12 to 15%. It's going to be a tough one. I'm going to pick the Bucks in 5, mainly because I think Drummond and Blake Griffin's work on the boards will get them at least 1 victory. And as amazing as Giannis is, it's going to be the supporting cast of the Bucks, who I'm not sure will show up consistently in the playoffs like last year when they lost to the Boston Celtics. Now, then you have the Boston Celtics at the hosting the Indiana Pacers in round 1 of the 4 and 5 matchup. This one's very interesting to me because without Marcus Smart and Oladipo, this game looks a lot more even than it did before. Who will the Boston Celtics have in the starting lineup? Will it be Kyrie Irving and Jaylen Brown, or will it be Kyrie Irving, Tatum, and Gordon Hayward at the 3? Personally, if I was Boston, I would put Kyrie Irving, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Gordon Hayward, and Al Horford with a solid mix of Aaron Baines and Morris off the bench. Two players I would avoid playing at all costs if I could for serious minutes would be Terry Rozier and Daniel Tice. I don't like Tice in this matchup whatsoever. The way he matches up against Turner, Sabonis, Bogdanovic, I absolutely am terrified of because he has a bad habit of fouling. His shots are majorly inconsistent. As for Rozier, he is a major cancer in the locker room from what I have seen this season, and I cannot stand him ever since he got his ego filled last year, filling in for Kyrie Irving. When he's on the court, even if he has a plus, he's putting up bad shots. He's not setting up anybody else as well as he could. He is a great player, but he is in himself thinking he deserves more than what he actually does. It should be a tough season. It should be a tough series. Honestly, with Rozier being a free agent heading into the offseason, I honestly think he could turn it around, could get it together, and earn himself a nice fat contract. That being said, I love Bogdanovic here. In the last matchup in Indiana, Boston did come out with the win, but Bogdanovic did start that game like 1 for 7 or 1 for 8. Miles Turner, Sabonis, Bogdanovic, Thaddeus, all these players are tremendously capable rebounders. They can get boards, and the Celtics, rebounds are something they struggle with, so that could be an opportunity for Indiana to obviously win. The difference maker here being with me picking the Celtics in 6, winning the last game in Boston is being the guards for sure. Kyrie Irving, hands down, I would pick over any Indiana Pacer guard currently, especially in the 7-game series. I love Brad Stevens. This is about the time he's going to hopefully get it together in the 7-game series. Yes, he did struggle in the regular season getting his roster together, but in the 7-game series, there's only a few coaches I trust more than Brad Stevens. You did see what he did last year against the Cavaliers with basically a bunch of young guns and backups. And then you have Philadelphia at Brooklyn. This one is a very, very capable upset candidate, being 3 reasons I have Brooklyn having a chance to win, although I am picking the 76ers in 6 as well. Brooklyn, to me, has a really good chance of winning, being if they can limit Ben Simmons' ball movement, knowing he can't shoot outside the paint for shit. He is literally, I think, shooting outside of 10 feet, maybe 20%, and he has not made a 3 yet in his career, which to me limits the capabilities of Philadelphia. Other concerns being Joel Embiid possibly missing Game 1 and having an injury history like he does raises a bunch of red flags. If Brooklyn can possibly steal Game 1, they could take the momentum and roll with it. D'Angelo Russell is a very capable momentum type guard. With Allen on the block, it is very, very likely Brooklyn steals 1 or 2 games, especially if Embiid does miss 1 or even 2 games in this series. Butler, Harris, they're going to have to show up. If they take this series, they flame out. If Philadelphia exits in the first round, I don't see too many people jumping the gun to sign these 2 dudes. This series is going to ride on their 3-point shooting and their defense. Then you have Orlando finally making the playoffs. Hallelujah, sweet Jesus. I've been cheering for them for like the last 2-3 weeks. I've actually been cheering for them for the last 3-4 years since my very first NBA 2K character got drafted by the Magic, and I had to deal with Peyton's freaking bad shooting the whole time. Anyway, this matchup is tough. You got Vucevic against Ibaka, but although Portland or Orlando is likely to get swept in this series, maybe they steal 1. I'm going to go gentleman sweep here, thinking they at least take a 1 in Orlando. I'm picking Toronto in 5. This is a perfect opportunity for Nikola Vucevic to get some attention on the national level, on the national stage, to possibly be courted by a team like LA, like maybe an LA Laker. Maybe the Celtics draft him, or maybe the Celtics try to sign him, maybe replace a Marcus Morris and move Al Horford to the 4 where I feel like he feels more comfortable. It would be interesting to see. Hell, Vucevic could even be a chance to go to Portland and provide a tremendous rebounding presence for his team that very, very much needs it. Now, for the second round, that sets up tremendous matchups all around, with Golden State taking on the Houston Rockets. Now, this one's very, very tough for me to predict indeed. I don't want to necessarily go against Golden State. I mean, I do want to, but I don't want Houston winning. I'm going to pick Golden State in 5 here. I think James Harden, he can shoot well enough. He draws fouls enough. He might draw some techs on Draymond Green, where he is an irritating person to defend. Who knows? But I'm going to pick Golden State in 5 to win this matchup and advance to the Western Conference Finals. Now, in the matchup of OKC and San Antonio, I'm picking OKC in this one. One reason being the road record for San Antonio. Granted, even if they perform better in the first round, even if Denver makes it past San Antonio, I'm still going to pick OKC in this matchup. I love Adams as a defender. I think he matches up well with Jokic. One concern for either Jokic or Aldridge would be defensive ball movement. Can they prevent it? On the OKC side, I love Paul George. I think he is one of the most clutch players left in the playoffs, although he does struggle at times. If he gets into a rhythm, he's one of the most dangerous. Now that would honestly set up, well, I'm going to pick OKC in 6 in that series just because shooting is a concern for OKC. I do think there will be a game or two where they do struggle and it costs them the victory close in the end of the game. Now that sets up the Warriors and OKC in the Western Conference Finals for the first time since Kevin Durant ran away with his tail tucked between his legs. I'm going to pick Golden State, but I think it's going to be a longer series than most would predict in the Western Conference Finals. I am going to pick Golden State in 7 here, being because I think Schroeder is very underrated when it comes to his defense. I think he'll do a relatively decent job on Steph Curry. To me, it's going to be, can they expose Klay Thompson? Can they avoid Klay Thompson's suffocating defense? He often guards best players on other teams, and he does not get much respect for that. I think Klay Thompson's going to be the key in the Western Conference Finals in this one and lead the Golden State Warriors to the finals. In the East, for at least the second round, you have Milwaukee versus the Boston Celtics. I personally, even as a Boston Celtics fan, Marcus Smart not likely to be here is a huge concern, as Boston did struggle last year to guard LeBron James in the Eastern Conference Finals. A very similar situation here could arise against Milwaukee with Giannis Antetokounmpo. One thing I believe that gives the advantage to Boston here, and I'm not even saying this as a Boston fan, is where, yes, Giannis is an amazing player. I believe the ability for the Celtics to switch on defense, Jaylen Brown being decent on defense as well, as long with their three-point shooting, which is often missing and often inconsistent, but when focused, it is almost unbeatable when the Celtics play on their A game. I like the Bucks here, but I'm going to pick the Celtics in the upset, mainly because I want to pick at least one upset this playoffs, and for me, it would have to be Boston over Milwaukee, because Milwaukee's got to be the favorite to advance to the NBA Finals. At least that's what I think. That would pit also Philadelphia versus Toronto in the second round. With injuries or wear and tear building up on Philadelphia, I'm going to pick Toronto in this series. I like the depth of Toronto. I like the defensive capabilities of Toronto. The matchup of Ibaka and Gasol against Joel Embiid is going to be a fun one to watch. Kawhi Leonard, personally, I would put him on Ben Simmons, limit his effectiveness in the paint, and leave Siakam and possibly Lowry or Green to defend Harris and Butler. This one's also interesting for sure because JJ Redick, although sometimes he's not as involved as he should be, if he's hitting it like he did sometimes in the playoffs last year, the 76ers are an extremely dangerous out. I think this game goes to 6. I think this series goes to 6 games. I think Toronto takes it. I think it's going to be a close one. It's going to ride on the back of Toronto's defense. Now for the Eastern Conference Finals, that puts Boston for the second year in a row, this time against Toronto for the first time in a long time, not against LeBron James. They probably have the inside road to the NBA Finals. Who matches up better against Golden State Warriors? Probably to the Toronto Raptors here. It's going to be a defensive game. To me, I feel like the advantage goes to the Toronto Raptors. They have the better advantage with the rebound, the defense of Siakam, most likely guarding Jason Tatum. I think Kawhi in this matchup would have to guard Kyrie Irving, and I think that would open up the door for Gordon Hayward, for an Al Horford. As much as I like Ibaka and as much as I like Gasol, I think Horford is a little bit too pass happy, a little bit too bouncy for them to really be too effective. Also, I think Baines is a good matchup for Gasol and a good matchup for Ibaka defensively and offensively, especially with his extended range. I'm going to pick the Boston Celtics here in 7 in another upset, being because I would look at their best players, which is Kawhi Leonard and Kyrie Irving, and I trust Kyrie Irving much more. I look at the bench, and as much as I love the starting lineup of Toronto, I trust the bench of the Celtics a little bit more, with Aaron Baines possibly riding the pine, even with Marcus Smart out. I like Jaylen Brown, whether he starts or if he's on the bench. Robert Williams in this matchup, if he plays, I think matches up really well. If he can control his foul trouble against a Siakam, maybe against Ibaka if he has to. He's a really good blocker who reminds me kind of a really, really, really young Ibaka. Maybe not as good, but still, it's going to be a good game. And then that would pit the Boston Celtics against the Golden State Warriors, who, interestingly enough, the Celtics have had a good history in Golden State over the last few years, including the Warriors 72 or 73-9 record. Isaiah Thomas and the Celtics did defeat Golden State in Golden State, one of the only teams to do that year. I think the Celtics could steal a game or two here. With Kyrie Irving's experience against Golden State, I really do think that helps the Boston Celtics in this matchup. I think it does steal them a couple of games, although the three-point inconsistencies for the Boston Celtics, I think, eventually do them in. I think Golden State wins this matchup in 6, I do think the series will be tied at 2-2 to start, but inconsistencies, I believe, pile up. I love the defense of Klay Thompson. Marcus Smart should be healthy at this point. Marcus Smart is a little bit foul happy, and one thing that also concerns me in the Celtics in this matchup with the Golden State Warriors' tenacity at three-point shooting is the Celtics seem to often foul people shooting a three, and that's going to cost them here. Inconsistencies for the Celtics three-point shooting, inconsistencies on their three-point defense, I think give the Warriors the finals. Now, yes, I'm aware people might accuse me of being having a bias towards the Celtics, but I don't want to pick the same finals everyone else is picking. I don't want to pick the same results everyone else is picking. I want to be in the minority. So you have a good day. Let me know who you think wins. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.